What is your outlook for the Chinese economy? Is the rebound stalling out? We saw that the Chinese yuan dropped below the 7 mark for the first time in 6 months.
Well, I think if you're focusing on the trade numbers in April, there's a bit of misunderstanding there. A large part of the imports where China is concerned is largely with processing imports. And that means, because China is the final assembly point, if demand for electronics from US and Europe actually slows down, then obviously there'll be less coming into China for the final assembly to be exported out to the US or to Europe. Right? And that's one of the reasons why the import numbers look particularly bad. But if you look at the May numbers, that could potentially see a rebound because of the fact that the Golden Week holiday numbers in China were very, very strong. We're seeing that actually happening. But I think the key to all that is the property market. The property market recovery must be more broad-based. Right now, it's confined to the Tier 1 cities. And on top of that, it's also confined to the SOE developers. You need that to spread to the non-SOE developers and to the Tier 3, Tier 4 cities as well, before we can actually say that there's a recovery coming through. So on that front, we think that the PBOC will probably have to engage a couple more reserve requirement ratio cuts, the MLF cuts as well. And on top of that, I think government spending must actually pick up too.
But in terms of Southeast Asia, though, who might be at more risk when have more exposure or negative exposure to the slowdown in China? Might it be the ones who export components, as you mentioned, that go into the final assembly of these factories, or the raw material exporters like the Indonesia, Malaysia, and to some extent the Philippines as well?
Yeah, I think it's more likely to be Vietnam and Thailand from the tourism perspective. From the manufacturing perspective as well, if you look at the export-oriented countries in Asia, they've all been slowing down. So it's not just a China-centric issue, right? Singapore's exports, Malaysian exports, Taiwan's exports, they've all actually been coming off in the last, I would say, 4 to 5 months. So it's not just a China-centric issue. But I think if you're talking about growth in China, I don't think the commodity players are likely to suffer because there is demand. It's just the inventory levels are pretty high in China right now, right? After the restocking towards the end of last year. So I think at this point in time, there's a bit of a pause, but we do expect that to actually come in a bigger way towards the end of the year. Yeah.
The big beneficiaries of the supply chain redistribution in Southeast Asia have been Philippines, Malaysia, Vietnam, Thailand to a certain degree. But I just got back from Thailand, and economists overwhelmingly are saying that, look, whoever is in the next government, whoever forms the next leadership, really need to take that up a notch because it's lagging behind. How is there? Does that story, does that supply chain redistribution story still have legs in the longer term for those Southeast Asian economies?
Okay.
Or do they have to reinvent the wheel?
They have to reinvent, not as much as reinvent as to reinvest in infrastructure. Right now, if you're looking at the likes of Malaysia, Vietnam, they're really running out of capacity. And we're not just talking about physical capacity in terms of factory space. We're talking about skilled labor as well, right? Technicians, engineers, they're quickly running out of them, right? Whereas on the Chinese front, as we've just talked about it, urban unemployment is high, right? The unemployment rate amongst the 16 to 24-year-old is basically at about 20.4%. So China really has the capacity. And on top of that, they also have the infrastructure. We talk about Thailand, right? Infrastructure rebuilding needs to actually happen and happen at a faster rate, right? Because of the fact that, on the eastern seaboard side, despite the fact that, you want to build up the infrastructure there via the new ports, the new airports, etc., that hasn't really happened at this point in time. And largely it's also because of the politics. So they need to get the politics right. And on top of that, they need to get the infrastructure right.